Thank you, sir. Okay, we're glad everyone joined us today. Let's go ahead and get started. Uh, Mary and I are going to talk about herbs for spring, and these are generally herbs that grow well, not just in Montgomery County, but pretty much throughout our area, and a lot of them throughout the state. We're going to start with culinary herbs. And herbs, of course, are generally considered a plant that has soft stems and soft leaves, but there are subspecies. But basically, there are subspecies, of course, are herbs and spices are generally considered hard or dried herbs uh, taken from the nuts or the bark of different spices. Cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, those are all examples of that. We're going to be focusing on the most well-known herbs and ones that grow well in our area. But there are many excellent books on herbs, and probably one of the best is by Madeline Hill, and it's called Southern Herb Growing, and she was kind of a pioneer for growing herbs in our area. Now, this book is currently out of print, but if you search it, you can find it. If you just do a Google search of Madeline Hill Southern Herb Growing, you can find copies of it that you can buy. Of course, they're all going to be used, but that doesn't matter. It's really a great book. Another good one that I actually just received as a gift is called the Reader's Digest Complete Illustrated Book of Herbs. And it's really a good book. It has a lot of comprehensive information. It has good recipes and so on and so on. Technically, I don't think it's as good as Southern Herb Growing in that book, but just for us general gardeners, it's really a good book. But again, most of the herbs we're going to be presenting are culinary herbs. We here don't grow a lot of or don't promote a lot of what are called medicinal herbs because we're not trained in that degree in terms of knowing what's good, what's bad, what the counter interactions are, and those kind of things. So we generally sell and grow mostly culinary herbs. A good thing to understand is that herbs can grow in small places. You don't have to have a big garden. They don't have to be in the ground. A lot of them grow just as well in pots as they do in the ground, but they don't require a whole lot of space, and they tend to be very hardy and are easy to grow. They're a good plant for beginning gardeners because they can see a lot of success very quickly.
I just wanted to add that in terms of where you grow your herbs, we traditionally think of herb gardens, but as Rick was saying, they can grow in pots. So container gardening of herbs is really appropriate. Also, they grow well in hanging baskets, excuse me, and in raised beds. And we should also consider adding them to our landscape bed. There's nothing better than having herbs as you're working in the garden and the fragrance that they give off, and their color adds to our landscape situation. And I guess my recommendation is when you're planting herbs, no matter where you plant them, is to always plant two. Plant one for the pollinators because many herbs are excellent pollinators once they've bolted or gone to flower, and then one for our own culinary uses. So we'll go ahead and start.
Okay, if you have questions, please type those in as we go along, and we'll get to as many as we can. We're going to start out with sweet basils, and there are many, over 150 different varieties of sweet or Genovese being the most common, but there are many different types of basils that are available. The New varieties are being developed all the time. Uh, they're considered an annual, but many varieties will reseed themselves year after year. So if you let them go to seed in the garden and let those seeds fall, they will inevitably come back year after year. The purple ruffles that's pictured is one of those that'll do that. I want to also mention that the balsamic blooms basil is now a Texas superstar, and that's a great plant. Now it tends to be a large plant, and that's one of the ones that really look good as a landscape plant. The Also the African blue basil makes a really excellent uh, landscape plant and is a tremendous pollinator. Again, that becomes as large as you will let it. So if you don't want a gigantic plant, you might want to trim it back as you're going along. But it has a deep purple bloom, and the bees just go nuts over it. But the true and major goal for growing basil is for its culinary purposes and its marvelous scent. What would tomato sauce, spaghetti sauce, lasagna, all of those things be without it? It makes great, obviously, pesto is the main ingredient in pesto, and it can be used on pasta, hot or cold. It freezes easily. It dries easily. One caveat is that basil breaks down at very low temperatures, so add it last or off heat in order to retain its strongest or best flavor. Now, some of the other varieties that are not sweet basils, such as Thai basil and the balsamic bloom and the African blue basils, they're not quite as strong as the Italian or Genovese type basils. So if you want a milder basil flavor, then those are some that will give you that. Again, they can be grown in containers or in the garden. It's a great companion plant for tomatoes and most other vegetables. However, keep it away from cabbage because it'll impact cabbage. Varieties such as African blue basil and Thai basil, again, are very attractive landscape plants because the African blue, the color of its stems and leaves, and the flowers on both of those are really pretty. Now, basil also deters mosquitoes. It's invigorating when added to bath water and is said to aid digestion when used as a tea.
This is an opportunity to, Rick mentioned storing basil, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about because you can dry it, but I wanted to talk a little bit, excuse me, about storing herbs in general. And one of the great ways to do it is to use to freeze them. And it's really helpful if you have a ice cube tray and you can fill it with chopped, each little compartment, each cube with your chopped herb, and then put a little water in there, and then so create an ice cube. So when you're cooking with it, you just add that ice cube to your sauce or your stew, and it lends itself very well if you don't have any fresh at the time. The next herb we're going to talk about is borage. It's an old-fashioned plant, and it's native to the Middle East. It has an ancient history in war as an enhancement for bravery and courage. It grows really quickly as an annual, and it is definitely an annual. You can put it in the corner of your garden, and it will self-seed, thus reappearing year after year. It has a beautiful, brilliant blue flower, and that appears in June and July, although I have some right now that's blooming. It's a great pollinator, attracts butterflies, and brings those bees and other pollinators to our vegetable gardens. It's a great companion plant for strawberries because of the fact that it's such a good pollinator. In terms of using it for culinary uses, it's mainly the flowers that are used, and they're used as garnish or in potpourris or candied and used as confections. But the flowers can be eaten, and they're great fresh in salads. The leaves are oval in shape and have a rough, hairy feeling. The lower leaves can grow as big as 6 inches in length. and the plant can get it grow 12 or more inches wide. You can also use borage because of its in cooking. It's best in stews or sauces, and it would be added at the beginning when you're cooking because of that hairy feature on the leaves. The plant itself likes well-drained soil with average organic matter.
Next is German chamomile, and it's a hardy, self-seeding annual herb. It has long been cultivated in Germany to minimize it or to maximize its medicinal properties. The hollow, bright gold cone of the blossoms is ringed with numerous white rays. The herb has also been called scented mayweed and Balder's eyelashes after Balder, the Norse god of light. German chamomile is also a sprawling member of the Asteraceae family, as it closely resembles the Roman chamomile. Colonists brought the tiny seeds to America with them, and chamomile continued as one of the most frequently used home remedies to quiet babies and as a tea for nightcaps. Chamomile tea may be made from an infusion of blossoms prepared as a tisane or a single soothing cup, or in a larger quantity for use throughout the day. Chamomile combines well with mints, such as lemon balm or spearmint, combined in equal quantities. For a tisane, use 1 teaspoon of dried blossoms or 1.5 teaspoons of freshly picked flowers in a warm cup. Heat water to the boiling point and pour it over the blossoms in a glass container. You cover and infuse for 3 to 5 minutes. Then you strain it. Be careful not to oversteep chamomile, lest it lose its delicate flavor to a bitter edge. So if you let it steep for too long, it becomes bitter. Standard dose is up to 3 cups per day, and the prepared tea will help for a day or two. Will keep for a day or two in the refrigerator. But it also, again, makes a really nice landscape plant. It's kind of a low-growing herb, and it just has some beautiful flowers.
The next herb we're going to talk about are chives, and it's been used for over 5,000 years, and it's originated in China. Marco Polo brought this herb back from China to Europe. It's very easy to grow, either in the ground or in containers. A little sunlight, a bit of water, and they will thrive. In our warm climates, it is an evergreen and can be used year-round. To determine if you're looking at an onion chive or garlic chive, you need to look at the stalks or the leaves. Both are bright green, but the onion chive has a round, hollow leaf, while the garlic leaf is flat. In the garden, they make a great border plant, used rather than mondo grass. They bloom in the spring, and if you don't want them to seed, you cut off the heads. Interplant them both with veggies and flowering plants and fruit trees. Anywhere you desire to deter pests, which do not like their scent. They attract beneficial insects. They're great companion plants, improving the growth and the flavor of carrots and tomatoes. Planted near roses, they offer protection from pests and black spot, all the while creating a natural mulch. But you want to keep them away from beans. Looking for an organic spray, take a bunch of chopped chive leaves, put them in a bottle or a jar, cover them with boiling water, and let them sit until the water cools. Put it in a spray bottle and use 1 to 2 times a week to prevent the fungus, downy mildew, which attacks cucumbers, squash pumpkin, and other gourds. In the kitchen, onion chives are good on everything from potatoes, eggs, to pasta, or any place where you want to add onion flavor. The onion blossoms are edible and can be added to salads or floated on top of soups. These are a good finishing, chives are a good finishing herb. To harvest your onion chives or your garlic chives, you cut the leaves all the way to the bottom. If you just cut at the tip, they will not regrow. Use your garlic and chives any place you want a light, use your garlic chives any place you want a light garlic flavor. And that's the beauty of the garlic chives, is that if you're not a particular garlic lover, you still get a mild flavor with the chives. Both the onion and the garlic are great on veggies and for herb butters. Both are best eaten raw or quickly cooked as in stir fries. That's why you would add them to a recipe at the end as a finishing herb.
I'll say also about chives that they survive the winter. The chives that I have in my yard were not phased one bit by the freeze in February, and they have come back twice as strong as in the past. The blooms are a light purple, and you can eat those blooms too. I mean, the blooms have a really mild onion flavor that you can, sprinkle over salads and those kind of things. Let's talk about cilantro or coriander. It's been around for thousands of years. It can be traced back to 5000 BC. It was used by Hippocrates as an aromatic stimulant. It's been found in Egyptian tombs. Biblical herbs used it as a bitter herb at the Passover meal. Caesar soldiers carried it with them, both to flavor and preserve food. It's mentioned in Tales of the Arabian Nights. And if you have ever been curious to know what sugar plums are, well, sugar plums don't have anything to do with plums. They're basically, in their original state, were candy-coated herbs and herb seeds or leaves. And coriander was a very common seed that was used as a sugar plum. Coriander was brought to America in the year 1670, and was one of the first herbs grown in the colonies. It was introduced to Mexico and South America by the Spanish conquistadors, and quickly it was incorporated into their culture. As to the confusion of names, cilantro and coriander, if you're going to the store in England and ask for cilantro, you may just get a blank stare, because the entire plant is actually called coriander. Now, we separate the two here because the leaves and the seeds have a completely different flavor. And once the plant goes to seed, once it bolts and goes to seed, the flavor of the leaves themselves changes drastically. They're really not as good after it bolts. This is one of those herbs that you either hate it or you love it. To many, the scent is unpleasant. I love it myself, but its name comes from a Greek word meaning bed bug, because it smelled like that unsavory critter. Never realized that. This is a cool weather herb, so why do you see it in the spring? Because we all want it to go with our summer tomatoes and peppers. It's hard to get the timing right on this. However, it can be used any place parsley is used, and of course that would include salsa and guacamole, and what would those be without it? Every part of the plant is edible. The leaves are used with other greens in a salad, herb butters, cheese balls, as well as the aforementioned salsa and guacamole. New uses are popping up all the time as cooks develop new recipes. It has a very strong, very distinct flavor. The tender stems can be used also in the same manner. The seeds are usually used in baked goods and liqueurs, in pickling. They give a really strong kind of mellow flavor to pickling. Now in the garden, cilantro is really easy to grow. It'll bolt at the first sign of heat. It encourages pollinators and beneficial insects. If you're interested in harvesting the seeds, watch the seed heads carefully, since they ripen quickly. You cut the flowers just as they begin to turn color, and then hang the flowers upside down in a paper bag to collect the falling seeds. That's the easiest way to do it. If purchasing coriander, buy the seeds rather than the powder, which the powder quickly will lose its flavor. And you can grind the seeds yourself. It's kind of, similar to black pepper. It's always better if it's fresh ground. When purchasing seeds or plants for cilantro or coriander, you want to look for slow bolting varieties, and they're developing more of those year by year. The one that we grow primarily here in the gardens is called a Calypso, which is a very slow bolting variety. You can postpone the change from what we will call a change from cilantro to coriander by really nipping those. As soon as you see those buds or that stem starting to form for that flower head, clip it off. And if you keep those clipped, you can get another, month out of the plant before it officially goes to seed.
I just wanted to add one thing about cilantro. I think that buying it at the store or harvesting from the garden, it becomes a storage issue. And I have found some success in putting a bunch bought from the grocery, say, clipping off the bottoms of them so they have a fresh stem to absorb water, and putting it in a glass of water just up to the leaves. And then sticking that glass in my refrigerator on the door, particularly, so I don't have to worry about it toppling over in the shelving area. And then it's wonderful to go and so it's there when you want to use it. And that's the other thing, when you put it in a vegetable drawer, it's out of sight, and sometimes we forget about those things. But when it's on the door in that glass and it's staying fresh, it's easy to remember to use it. So it's wonderful to put on a breakfast taco with eggs, or on any kind of a taco, actually. Okay, the next herb we're going to talk about is cutting celery, and this is one of my favorite herbs. It's also known as leaf celery or French celery. A most flavorful choice, a much more flavorful choice than its crunchier cousin, the stalks of celery that we get at the grocery. It is a leafy aromatic herb that can be substituted for celery in dishes if you want to add flavor without the stringy fibers. It's often mistaken for flat leaf parsley. So when you're planting it in your garden, put them far apart, because if the tag gets lost and you're not sure what it is, you don't want to mistake it for parsley. It has a dark, glossy leaf with a serrated edge and small sprig-like stalks, and it's distinctly celery scent. The leaves and the stem can be used to add flavor to salads, vegetable stews, and soups. It's really a wonderful plant in the sense that we go to the store and we buy a stalk of celery. We may use a few of the ribs of it, and then it sits in our vegetable drawers at home in the refrigerator, and it becomes soft and mushy. This is so much nicer that you can go out to the garden and just get a really flavorful piece of celery flavor, and not have to invest in a product that you're not going to be able to use all of. It is related to the carrot family. It's a culinary herb, and it packs a punch of taste into its slender stems and delicate leaves, and it does have a much stronger flavor. So a little goes a long way in terms of when it's called for in a recipe. Just a few sprigs of the savory herb will replace the taste of an entire bunch of store-bought celery. That's how strong the flavors are. You want to trim this tenacious perennial leaves often to encourage flavorful new growth, because if you let it go, it will develop stalks as large as the ones its cousin that we buy at the grocery, and then it's really beyond its use. It's much too tough. Through winter, the winter hardy, this anise-flavored herb will grow well in pots or containers indoors and can be easily transported to the garden in the spring. So that's a good way. If you're concerned about losing it over the winter months, you can put it in a kitchen garden on a windowsill, and then just move it back outside in the warmer weather.
Another thing about the cutting celery is it has a very, very distinct celery smell. When you pick it, you know it's celery. So that's one easy way to tell whether you've got parsley or cutting celery is just smell it, because it smells like celery. And next we're going to talk about dill. And dill is another native of the Eastern Mediterranean and Western Asia regions. Charlemagne made sure that it was on the banquet table at all times so his guests could chew on it to aid their digestion if they had overindulged. Early settlers brought dill to America, and it has been widely grown. Children were given the seeds to chew in church to keep them quiet. Thus, the seeds were dubbed meetin seeds. You know, Sunday go to meetin seeds, and they would give them to children for them to eat. In the garden, dill is an annual plant. It's easy to grow. It prefers cool weather and thrives in good soil with sufficient water. It helps to keep garden pests under control. It serves as a decoy plant for tomato hookworms also. The beautiful swallowtail butterfly and caterpillar find it irresistible. Therefore, it acts as a lure for them. It's a good companion plant for lettuce and cabbage to encourage their growth. That swallowtail butterfly and their caterpillars, we've noticed in our display gardens here, that once that dill goes to bloom, those caterpillars come in droves and they will completely defoliate that plant, which is fine because then you get a beautiful butterfly out of it. And they're pollinators. In the kitchen, it can be used fresh in a lot of dishes, and it should be used raw. If used in cooking, add at the last minute to prevent the flavor oils from being destroyed. The flavor will quickly break down under heat. Both flower and seed are edible, using the ferny leaves especially for seafood. Also tasty in herb butters. It can be chopped and added to potatoes and potato salads. One of the reasons that dill has been used to preserve food, think pickles, is because it keeps bacteria away, keeping food safe for longer periods of time. Both the leaves and the seeds can be dried for use in the kitchen. It's a good source of calcium and dietary fiber, as well as manganese and iron. It's used in the past for wound healing via poultices. The trick with dill is to get it to grow until your cucumbers are ready. It's really difficult because dill is more of a cooler spring plant, and tomatoes are not. You know, they grow at the end of the summer before it gets too hot. So if you can, or not tomatoes, but cucumbers, you know, then they grow all summer. So it's hard to time that so that you get both fresh at the same time. But it does make a beautiful, beautiful plant. It will grow in sun or part shade. I have a large plant that's more or less under an elevated bed that is under sort of under a crepe myrtle tree, and it's growing beautifully.
One more comment about dill is that it speaks well to what I mentioned earlier about planting more than one, because when your dill is ravaged by caterpillars, you want to have multiple plants so that you can still have some for culinary use. The next herb we're going to talk about is fennel, and its cultivation dates back to ancient Greece. Battles were fought at Marathon, and the field was planted with fennel. And for a while, the Greeks called the plant Marathon. In Greek mythology, knowledge was given to men in the form of burning coal on a fennel stick. The ancient Romans believed chewing a stalk of fennel would prevent obesity. In medieval times, fennel was hung around the house to deter ghosts and evil spirits, as well as to bring good luck. It looks similar to dill, and like dill seeds, it was given to children during some Sunday sermons to keep them quiet. Fennel comes in 3 types. There's a Florence fennel, and it has an enlarged bulb and is used as a vegetable. Wild fennel, which is bitter and of little use, and the sweet fennel, which is tasty and a valuable herb. Sweet fennel comes in 2 colors, green and bronze, and they are grown and used interchangeably. Both are tall, ferny plants. Mature plants can grow as tall as 4 feet, so leave space for that possibility. Excuse me, it can be planted in early spring or in the fall. It's a perennial and winter hardy in most areas. When the plant has finished blooming, cut the stalks to the ground level and start over again. It's another attractor of swallowtail butterflies and its caterpillars. So again, plant more than one. All parts of the plant are edible. The leaves and stalk are good flavorings for fish, and the seeds are often used in making sausage. Use raw in salads or use as a garnish on any plate for an attractive presentation. The seeds have a wonderful anise flavor when eaten while still fresh, and often unsoft from the plant or after they are dried. It's fun to go to the garden and when they're going to bloom just before they open and they're still in their bud stage, to put a little bit of that in your mouth. It tastes very much like licorice, and it's a great breath freshener. And it is very, very refreshing. Before we go to the next herb, I wanted to ask Michael, if there were any questions so far. Okay, we'll go proceed.
Okay, and next we're going to talk about mint. And who doesn't like mint? I mean, we have it in a lot of varieties. Actually, there are over 600 varieties to choose from, with more being developed all the time. It's known as the herb of hospitality and fun. Think mint julep and mint gum. It has a fresh, lively taste. The Greeks and Romans crowned themselves with it and used peppermint as a main table decoration, as well as flavoring their foods, sauces, and wines. It has been used for centuries by people in all stations of life. Like many other herbs, it was brought to the New World by the Pilgrims. The name mint comes from Greek mythology. Menthe was a nymph that was turned into a plant by the angry wife of some god that she got too close to, I guess. But anyway, that's where the name came from, and that's a little interesting tidbit, I guess. Mints are really easy to grow. Mints are almost too easy to grow. You have to kind of be careful where you put them, because they love to take over when they're planted in the ground. If you're going to plant them in the ground, and you don't want to end up with an entire field or bed full of mint, you really need to contain it. A number of creative ways have been developed. One is to cut out the bottom of a large planter pot. You put the mint in it and then bury the pot in the soil. Although it can be grown in shade, the sun enhances the essential oils, thus being more flavorful. You also have to remember that every place that a node from that plant touches the ground is going to grow a new plant, and they spread very, very quickly. Mint can make an excellent ground cover under shrubbery, roses, and other taller plants. Mint is considered an evergreen in our warm climate. About the only disease that attacks it is rust. If this happens to your mint and your in-ground plant, just pull it up and start over with new plants, because it's so readily available and it grows so well. This is another really good plant for beginning gardeners, because they can see a lot of success with it very quickly.
Just to add one thing about mint, it works very well in hanging baskets because of its invasive quality. But hanging baskets, you're kind of a slave to watering when you do that, and the mint does like a fair amount of water, so that's to be considered. The next herb that we're going to talk about is oregano. The Greek name means joy of the morning. It's a native Mediterranean plant, similar in taste to marjoram, only stronger. Oregano was fairly unheard of in the U.S. until after World War II, when the soldiers came home with a hankering for pizza. And there are many varieties of oregano, such as Greek, Italian, Syrian, golden, marjoram and Mexican. And there are also some varieties that are primarily ornamental, like a Cuban oregano. And there's a couple varieties of those. Cuban oregano can come in a variegated variety or a green variety. They're really not, their primary use is, again, ornamental and not really for culinary use, but it is a beautiful plant. And it was a really good opportunity to say how oregano works as a landscaping ground cover too. And if you have an area that you want to plant, say between pavers, and you want some greenery in it, walking over oregano, it's very hardy. But then you get that it will not die from that, you get that wonderful smell if you like the smell as you're walking over that each time. It can grow in poor soil and dry conditions. It does require good drainage, however. It prefers sun, but will grow in the shade. It is drought resistant. Sounds perfect for Texas. You can grow it as a ground cover, as a border in the ground, or in containers or in hanging baskets. Again, be careful at planting in the garden. It can take over. It can spread and be very invasive, so you'll need to, trim it back now and then. It is considered a perennial and evergreen here in Texas. It's a great companion plant to tomatoes. Used especially in Italian cooking and particularly tomato sauce.
Oregano is another plant that survived our recent freeze very, very well. It comes back. A lot of the oregano that I have died back, but now it's completely recovered. The next herb we're going to talk about is parsley, and that's been cultivated since before the 3rd century BC. The Romans used it to decorate their tables, as well as strewing it on the floors to absorb unpleasant odors. I guess there were a lot of those back then. The Greeks tied parsley bunches to their horses' necks to make themselves impervious to weapons. And I wonder how that worked out for them. Europeans in medieval times believed that if you spoke an enemy's name while plucking parsley leaves, your enemy would drop dead. I don't think that would work. Again, this herb came to America with the early settlers. Parsley is probably the most widely known herb and most underused. Mostly it's relegated to being a garnish on plates and platters and being used after a meal to absorb the odors from strong foods that have been eaten, especially garlic. It contains a lot of chlorophyll. It's a biennial plant, and it produces bunches of leaves the first year and then flowers in the second year. The flowers attract beneficial insects. It prefers cool weather, so planted in the fall, shelter from the afternoon sun and provide a good mulch. It likes good soil. Water it when it becomes dry. Pests are rarely a problem. It's a good companion plant. It makes a lovely border, and again, it makes a really nice container plant or hanging basket. Plant it or sprinkle its leaves among tomatoes and asparagus plants to encourage their growth. It increases the general health of roses when planted around them. This plant also attracts swallowtail butterflies. They love it. It's known as a universal herb because it blends with most flavors and works well with many other herbs. It has its own mildly spicy taste. Use it in sauces, butters, dressings, pestos, bouquet garnis, and it's a good source of vitamins A and C and contains iron, iodine, and copper.
The next herb we're going to talk about is rosemary, and it's another ancient Mediterranean herb used both by the Romans and the Greeks as a medicinal and magical, considered a magical herb. It grew wild, so it was available to the poor for all kinds of purposes. Putting under the bed or pillow to promote a good night's sleep and pleasant dreams. It was believed to improve the memory. Shakespeare wrote in Hamlet, "There's rosemary for you, that's for remembrance. Pray you love, remember." However, that did not work out well for Ophelia. Modern research, however, is proving that there is some merit for this ancient belief. Scientists are finding that rosemary's properties do seem to improve memory and stimulate mental health. Rosemary is often used in bridal bouquets as well as funeral floral offerings, and wearing a necklace of rosemary was said to keep the wearer youthful. Growing rosemary, it likes warm weather gardens. It likes the heat, the sun, and rocky soil, so it lends itself well to the landscape beds and also rock gardens. But it must have excellent drainage and good air circulation. Mildew in our climate can be a problem in Texas because of the humid weather. I know many of us lost our rosemaries in the freeze. It does not like, obviously, really, really cold weather, and also does not like to be overwatered, and that goes back to that mildew problem. There are two types of rosemary: the upright and the prostrate. It has a woody stalk. There is a variety of rosemary called barbecue rosemary, where you can strip the leaves off of the stalk and use those as skewers, and then that infuses that rosemary flavor into your food. It can be used as hedges, trailing off rock walls and topiaries. It can be shaped, so you can trim it. One of the very popular uses of rosemary at Christmas is rosemary trees. They can be maintained in the house over the winter months and then transferred to your garden in the spring. Has a piney flavor, and it's wonderful with roast meats, poultry, and fish, and for bland foods like potatoes and legumes. It's a strong herb, so use the leaves wisely. A little goes a long way. The leaves can be stripped from that woody stem, as I mentioned, for grilling. Combine rosemary with vinegar and use the mixture to clean kitchens and bathrooms. We are seeing more commercially prepared products using rosemary for both cosmetics and home, and often it's infused into oil, and then it can be used in that way too, for flavorings.
On rosemary, it's also good to use if you have a smoker or you smoke meats. A lot of times what I will do is grab a big bunch of it, tie it up, and then just throw it on top of the fire pit, and that smoke infuses into that meat and gives it a really nice flavor. You can do the same thing on a barbecue grill. Next, we're going to talk about salad burnet. It's a perennial herb. It's native, again, to the Mediterranean, and it has a hardy tolerance. A member of the rose family, it's good for erosion control. It's a salad green, flavoring in vinegar and sauces. Also, it's easy to grow. It's a low 6 to 8 inch leafy plant that begins as a rosette. The leaves taste like cucumber, and they really do. It's surprising. Adding a fresh taste to a salad. It's a savory when added to herb butters mixed into spreading cheese, etc., cream cheese, and so on. Excuse me. And when chopped and sprinkled over veggies or as a plant, it's a part of a potato dish. The flowers appear in the spring and are a rounded cluster of purple to pink tiny blooms. The flowers can be used as a garnish for fresh drinks or cakes. It likes well-drained, neutral pH soil. It's sunny to partial shade locations. It starts easily from seed. It grows where it is planted. It doesn't like to be replanted, so make sure you like the location before you plant this herb. The flowers are not self-pollinated and must be pollinated by the wind. Self-seeds easily and forms a patch of the herb. You can remove the older parts as their flavor declines as the plant ages. So the best flavor of the leaves are the fresh, new growth.
just wanted to say a little bit about salad burnet. We have a plant that is blooming in a container in front of our greenhouse, and it is a beautiful, beautiful plant, which lends itself to putting in the landscape. And the other good news is that it's very hardy because it made it through our freeze. And I have one at home in my garden that looks just great. Makes a wonderful kind of mounding, spreading plant. So it's a good one to choose. The next herb that we're going to talk about is a salvia noir sage. It means good plant in Hebrew. It has a history too in Texas. In 1992, Madeline Hill, the herb guru, and a friend of hers, Gwen Barkley, purchased a bundle of herbs which were labeled oregano from a local grocer in San Antonio. And upon close inspection, they discovered that they had a woolly Salvia officinalis. Some of the leaves had a lobed appearance, similar to Salvia fruticosa. A Delaware State College professor confirmed the identification. The plant's 5 cuttings were propagated. 4 of them were sent to the growers for testing and assessing their survival rate in Texas. Madeline's original planting still exists today, having survived our Texas summers. They gave the plant a working name, silverleaf sage. Since many sages do not survive in our Texas heat, this sage has proved to be a great success for us and an asset. Madeline was unsure if it was an international cross. It has been recognized and is mentioned in Israeli research. Upon further investigation, it was found that it was developed by a horticulturist in NEWE, Israel, whose goal was to develop a sage hardy enough to be commercially productive in Israel's harsh climate. And it's very warm there. And so they were looking for something that would be a good commercial situation for them. It's a low perennial shrub with silver green foliage. It can reach 36 inches in height, so watch where you put it, and 30 inches across. So it can become a very good sized plant. The mature leaves can grow to 3 inches long and 1/2 inch in width. It produces a blue lavender flower, which first appears in February. Now, we have one growing in the herb garden right now, and it is in bloom and it is beautiful. But I think it's a little confused because it's clearly not February. But I think that all of our plants are a little bit in shock after our freeze, so it's not surprising. Many growers reported blooms throughout spring, but not in the hot summer months. It grows well both in the ground and in containers. Mulch it well, especially during the summer, and give it 4 to 6 hours of sun. So it won't look as great in our summer heat, but it will survive. It likes good ventilation and give it plenty of room to grow to obtain the most growth. It is an attractor of bees and it is a pollinator. It is both ornamental and culinary, has a mild, more pleasant flavor and fragrance than other sages, and stays relatively green when cooked. This is the whole idea of sage always brings to mind Thanksgiving, because we often use it in our stuffings and in Thanksgiving cooking. But that could be a different variety too than this. This is a much milder one, and clearly is suitable for our area.
Okay, next we're going to talk about red-veined sorrel. There are over 200 species of the Rumex family, of the sorrel family. This sorrel is the same family as rhubarb. It's also known as bloody dock. It's originally from Europe and Asia. The leaves are slender and tapered with red veins running through it. It has a strong, tangy, lemony flavor. It's a perennial, and the one I have survived again this winter. It didn't drop a leaf, and it's almost invigorated at this point. It's huge. It's doubled in size. It has pest and disease resistance. It's fairly drought tolerant. It grows in both sun and shade. It's a really good landscaping plant. When it's fully grown, it is just a beautiful plant. The leaves grow from the base. They're easy to grow, and it's a very low maintenance plant. At my house, it's a no maintenance plant. and it survives in spite of anything I've done to it. For culinary uses, it's best to eat the smaller leaves, and I think they're best raw in salads and things like that. And then you can cook the larger leaves almost like a spinach. It's really good. You can mix it with other greens and salads, but generally it's not eaten by itself. Blanching the leaves will reduce the bitterness. The cooked leaves are used in fish and stir-fried dishes, and it makes a really nice garnish. Red vein sorrel was especially bred for use in salads. Its use is fairly uncommon in the U.S., although I am seeing it more and more. I think I saw some at HEB last week, where this plant a few years ago, you would never see it in a grocery store.
Just another word about sorrel is that I think we're seeing it in the groceries just because it did survive through the cold weather, where some of our lettuces didn't fare as well. Also, if you keep watch over your sorrel, it looks really good now, but as we get into the heat of the summer, it's going to start to look a little wilted. Don't despair, because it will survive. Continue to water it, and it will come back strong and hardy after after the weather cools down. The last herb that we're going to talk about today is thyme. It's known as the scent of the Mediterranean. Thyme is an herb essential to cuisine because its fragrance and attractiveness. Growing thyme, there are many varieties of thyme: English, mossy, lemon. There are three main groups, however. There are uprights, creeping, and flat. The upright is used in cooking. The other two are used in gardens. All need good drainage, and they also like heat, sun, and rocky soil. The creeping thymes are particularly pretty in a garden landscape situation, sometimes called cinch thyme. They often have a red or white or pink flower. Thyme grows well in containers. Try mixing all three types for a smart-looking presentation, so you get a little bit of each of their qualities. Upon establishment, thyme is carefree, requires little fertilization, and no pest control, and is drought resistant. In our humid climate, it may not need to be replaced every few years. Bees love the thyme flowers. Thyme blossoms make a great and prized honey. The plant draws beneficial insects as well. It does deter cabbage worms. It can be used for home use in cleansers for the bathroom and the kitchen. It's culinary. It's essentially in most a culinary use in most cuisines, often mixed with parsley and bay leaves for a bouquet garni for soups and stews. Although it has very small leaf, it has big taste. So begin with a small amount. A little goes a long way again. Only the youngest green stems are good for cooking use. I just wanted to say at this time that that was our last herb that we're going to talk about today, that many of these varieties that we've talked about today will be available in our upcoming virtual plant sale. And that plant sale will take place online on the 28th and 29th of this month, with pickup of the plants that you purchase on May 1st and 2nd. To get a list of the plants, continue to check our website for that information. Our final varieties should be, I'm sure there's a list online right now, but the final varieties and numbers will be entered as we move closer to the sale dates.
This is by no means an exhaustive list of herbs, obviously, and there are hundreds and hundreds of different types, but we tried to touch on the most common that people use at this time of the year, and hopefully that was helpful. If you have questions, anyone?
Yes, that's fine, but know that it will alter the flavor of the. Oh, okay. The question was, is it okay to let sage bloom in the spring? And my answer is yes. Hopefully you've got more than one plant so that one can go to flower and one can be used for culinary purposes. Because once an herb goes to flower, and which is a word we call bolting, then it alters the flavor of the leaves or the plant in general. So yeah, it would be beautiful, I'm sure, a beautiful flowering plant, which we've seen in our garden. But it's really up to you as to whether you want to use it for culinary purposes or not.
What was the sweet basil that gets large, makes a large plant and can be used in landscaping. There's a couple of those. One of my favorite is the African blue basil, and it makes a large, really beautiful plant, is an outstanding pollinator. Thai basil is the same way. It's not quite as colorful or outstanding as African blue. And then there is the balsamic bloom basil and cardinal basils, yeah, which have just beautiful, big, full purple blossoms. And again, those make beautiful landscape plants. They become very large. So, make sure you may put something small in the ground, but make sure it has a lot of space to grow. But again, those are beautiful landscape plants. The African blue basil that I had, it died back. I thought it was going to come back from seed, but it hasn't. So I'm going to put a new one in. But walking by that plant when it's in full bloom and it's large, you can hear the bees on that plant well before you get to it. And that's the same with rosemary, is an incredible pollinator, and the bees just go nuts over it when it's in full bloom.
One more word about African blue basil is that I usually plant one in the middle of my raised bed vegetable garden, and it's great to attract the pollinators. There's always bees around, so I know that they're doing their work with my vegetables also. The balsamic and the cardinal basil, the balsamic has a wonderful, mild balsamic flavor to it. So it's a different flavor than a sweet basil. And the cardinal basil is a hardier basil. None of those basils survived our winter freeze, but occasionally if we have a mild winter, the cardinal and the balsamic will survive. And the cardinal has a milder flavor too. If you're not a real lover of a strong basil flavor, the cardinal is a good one to try, as well as the African blues. Any other questions, Michael? Okay, we'd like to thank you today for joining us. And oh, there's one more slide, I'm told. Okay, here we go. This is our resource contact information. So I alluded to the fact that we're having an upcoming plant sale. If you go to the last one up there, the www.mcmga.com, you will be able to find a list of the plants that we're offering in our online sale at the end of the month. And then just as a reminder, we do maintain a phone room where you can call. It's Monday through Fridays from 8 to 12, and then from 1 to 4, 5 o'clock, where you can call in and ask questions of if you're having plant problems at home, or if you're having an issue with something that you see on a plant. You can take a picture with a smartphone and send it in to us, and we will try very hard to analyze it. You can also bring things to us. We are taking things in the phone room now, and you can bring a sample if you have a branch or a bit of a twig from a branch or a tree or a shrub that has some sort of a unwanted spot on it. Bring it in, and we do have microscopes, and we have the ability to do the research right there and try to help you identify, and if not, we'll get the answer for you. We ask you to utilize that wonderful resource whenever you have a question about a plant or an issue.
I make one observation. Plant a rosemary plant in your husband's vegetable garden. Be sure he realizes it is going to get big. Don't let it be a surprise. They are not happy.
Yes. Exactly. And then that's something to really emphasize with any herb that you're putting in the ground, or any plant really in general, is to really know, read the descriptor on it, get as much information as you can about it, know its water and sun requirements, and also know how big it's going to get. I know we like to fill in things and so that things look solid in our gardens, but you have to give them the benefit of the doubt and know that, give them a little room to grow and expand. Once again, thank you for joining with us today. And we look for our on our website for our next Saturday program, which do we know our topic for our next Saturday program? Okay, surviving the summer with your turf grass. And I assume Michael will be doing that one. And so that will be around this time next month. In May. We usually have these around the second Saturday of the month, the 15th of May. So watch for that one. So as the summer heats up and we get a certain amount of rain, along with it comes lawn and turf problems. So watch for that, and we hope that you'll join us then. Thanks again for joining us today.